This episode is brought to you by The Manor, a premier addiction treatment facility in the hills of Wisconsin's Kettle Moraine Forest. Their program offers a tailored approach to those struggling with addiction in a secluded setting with no more than 11 men and women. With highly personalized treatment focused on trauma, Dr. Chantal Thomas and her expert team offer an authentic experience, creating the kind of deep emotional change that's crucial for long-term recovery. If you or someone you love are struggling with addiction, call The Manor at 414-930-1930. You can learn more about The Manor by clicking the link in the show notes or by visiting discoverthemanor.com. Thank you for listening to The Path to Authenticity. My name's Tom Gentry. I think of this show as the opposite of small talk. You'll hear real conversations with real people who know who they are. We talk about what makes them who they are, how they became who they are, and how we might become truer expressions of who we are.
I'm Spencer Reece, and this is The Path to Authenticity.
If this is your first time here, thanks for checking it out. If not, thanks for coming back. I'm Tom Gentry, and this is The Path to Authenticity. Episode 152 for November 30th, 2021. This interview with my friend, the poet Spencer Reece, was originally released as episode 9. Last week, the poet and author Robert Bly died. And if you've listened to the show, you've heard me mention one of his books, Iron John, which has made a huge impact on my life. And he was someone who I hoped to one day get on the podcast. But somehow I had in my head that he died a couple years ago. So I was really kind of perplexed when I learned that he was in fact alive. Died last Sunday. Anyway, I thought it would be nice to honor him by sharing this interview with my friend Spencer Reece, who is also a Minnesotan like Robert Bly, and also a prolific poet. Spencer has an incredible story of courage and persistence and success. He's reached the height of his profession and just an incredible guy. So this is one of the first interviews I did. So let me say I've improved quite a bit since then with both the manner in which I record and my interviewing skills. You hear me banging the mic around a little bit here and there. At one point, my phone rings. You can hear that. And a train in the background. In the middle of the interview, his AirPods died. He had to charge them and get wired headphones. We did this over Facebook Messenger. At the time, he was living in Madrid. So we did it in an afternoon, late evening his time. So it's a little quirky. There's some, it's not perfect, but it's a great conversation. And, it's kind of back in the archives where nobody has access to it, and it's just too good to conceal. I wanted to share it with you guys. Lots of new listeners since back then. So if you enjoy it, please leave a rating or a review at Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. The reviews really, really help, especially on Apple Podcasts. So I appreciate any support you're willing to offer. Every little bit helps. If you're interested, you can take part in my January journaling challenge, where I'm going to be sending out a writing prompt for each day in the month of January. Just need an email address. You can sign up through the link in the show notes. So yeah, this was a special conversation, and Spencer was one of the first people I thought about when I started putting together this podcast. I knew I wanted to talk to him, and you're going to enjoy this. So here you go. Spencer Reece.
Tom, it's good to hear your voice after all these years.
That is, how long has it been since we spoke, do you think?
Well, it could very well be 15 years, but maybe it's 10. Something like that.
Well, I know a couple years ago you took part in a documentary film. And,
I did.
And there was a premiere in Miami.
Yes.
And you invited me to that, and somehow
I did.
I got my wires crossed with the woman who was in charge of the tickets, and I didn't end up getting a ticket.
Oh.
It was sold out.
Well, it was sold out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, you can see it on, this is not a setup, but you can actually see it now on Amazon Prime. If you have Amazon Prime,
I do.
It was sold to a distributor, and you can watch it now for free if you have Amazon.
What's
Prime.
it called?
It's called Voices Beyond the Wall, and it's the story of these orphaned girls in the murder capital of the world finding their voices through poetry. And it's really very moving, and the people that worked on it was an editor who works with Woody Allen, and so the editing is beautiful. It won a prize for cinematography in Europe, I think, and it won a prize for directing in Montana. And then it got sold to a distributor finally. And it's really very beautiful.
So what was your role, Spence?
My role was that I'm in it, although I told them I was happy for them to make a documentary without me in it. But I won this thing called a Fulbright from the United States government.
The Fulbright Scholarship.
Yeah, Obama was president at the time, and I applied for this scholarship to go down there. President Barack Obama, who's a hero of mine, and I went down there, and I was there for a year.
Now, where's down there?
To San Pedro Sula, Honduras, which is the industrial capital of the country of Honduras. Okay. And I lived there for a year in an orphanage, the only orphanage for girls in a country of 250,000 orphans. Wow. And so they have, at any given time, about 72 girls there. And I taught poetry, which had never been done before. Wow. And then I got this film crew involved because I thought we needed to make a documentary film, although it was kind of naive because I knew absolutely nothing about filmmaking at all. But I fell into God was just really with me because I fell into the hands of an amazing director and team, and they made a really smart, beautiful film.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Man,
I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud.
And I look forward to watching it. I do have Amazon Prime, and I love documentaries, so I'm excited to check it out.
Yeah, it's good. It's not boring. It moves right along. They did an incredible job. It's a unique documentary because it's like a poem, which might sound like boring, but it's just it's like nothing I've ever seen before, and it's anything but boring. And it it's very organic and moves through their poems to tell the story of their lives. Wow. It's a piece of genius that Brad Coley directed it, and he's a director out in San Francisco, and he did just an incredible job.
That's so cool. I'm excited to see it. So listen, I want you to talk about exactly what you're doing now. But first, I want to talk about how you and I met.
Right.
I'll jog your memory a little bit. So back around 2002, I think it was.
Okay.
I was taking a Bible as literature class at Palm Beach State, which, was called something different at the time. But evidently you had crossed paths with the professor, a guy named Eddie Vega. Remember Eddie?
Oh, geez. Yeah.
And,
oh my God.
And so
is he still how is he?
I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea. So, so I was in this class. I had a writing workshop with him the year prior, and a whole lot of us had kind of migrated into the next class he was teaching the next term, this Bible as literature class. And he brought in a lot of speakers. So I came in one Monday night or Thursday night, whatever night it met, and there was this guy, Spencer Reece, who was a poet who was doing a reading.
Oh my goodness. Night. I don't remember this, but I'm so glad that you do. That was a lot of foresight on Eddie's part, because I don't think I was in the discernment process to become a priest then, but wow.
Yeah. Those things were unrelated. So anyway, I could just tell, at the time I worked for Hazelden, which is a Minnesota company, addiction treatment provider for those listeners out there who don't know. It's kind of the granddaddy of all addiction treatment centers. And
the mother love.
The mothership, yes. And
mothership.
So Spencer is a Minnesotan. So
That's right.
He was talking about his childhood in Minnesota, and me being a person in recovery at the time, I could just tell by the way that you were talking. I mean, you didn't mention anything about alcoholism or drug abuse or anything like that, but I knew. I picked up on the 12-step vibe from you, definitely. Yeah. So, what I decided was to, just kind of nudge you after the class and mention to you that I worked for Hazelden. And then it all kind of came out that we had both been sober for a long time. And so we actually started going to meetings together.
I do remember that.
Yeah.
I definitely.
Yeah. And I know it meant a lot to me as a young guy. I would have been about, I guess,
20s.
Maybe 26 or 28. I want to say 28 at that point. And, just to
this is like 20 years ago then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to have someone who was another aspiring writer, a Midwesterner. I also always loved the way you dressed because, you were the clerk at, Brooks Brothers, so you always looked really, really sharp, which is, always has impressed me. But,
that's kind of gone by the wayside. But at the time, that was my job.
Well, now you're a priest, so you wear what a priest wears, right?
It's made life a lot easier.
Yeah, I bet it has. So you're a poet. And you're a priest.
That's correct.
So how do those things, day to day, you're a priest, right? And tell us about that.
Oh, right. Talk about now.
Yeah.
So, right. For the last 5 years, I have served and was asked to come to Madrid to be the canon to the ordinary, which is a term for the person that works really closely with the bishop to oversee the diocese. And it's a very unusual small branch of the Anglican Communion and the Episcopal Church because Spain is extremely Catholic. So we're like a tiny little minority, which I was not used to having grown up in the United States, thinking of
as a white kid. Yeah.
Right. Thinking of the Episcopal Church as this minority. So it's been quite an education. And so I was asked to do that 5 years ago, and that is what I am currently doing now. I help the bishop with just about everything from fundraising, diplomacy, running the cathedral, doing the church newsletter, answering emails, dealing with issues with various priests in the diocese. And that's what I do right now. And I also oversee a 12-step ministry, which wasn't here when I got here, but has grown enormously. We have 32 meetings, 30 of which meet in the cathedral, and we have 300 people coming every week. I just came from one of those meetings. So God worked through me to open up those meetings because they weren't here when I started, and it was very organic and accidental that they began. But I'm sort of connected with that as the priest that's in recovery. And so I do a lot of counseling also, meeting with sponsees or people that need help in the program, because my office is like right next to where all these meetings take place. So that also happened accidentally too. But yeah, that's a part of what I'm doing now too. Yeah.
Well, I got to tell you, it warms my heart to know that you're holding that kind of space for people, because it does, because, you were just the kindest, warmest, one of the warmest people I've ever met. And
really?
Yes, absolutely. And
I've been under a lot of pressure lately. I've been kind of snappy and cranky. So, but that's nice. That's nice to know. And I suppose that is true about me.
I'm telling you, it's true. I mean, when we met, I was going through a life transition, and you were there for me. And, you've always had this, calming sort of, presence, and
I've heard that many times, so it must be true.
Yeah, that's actually people say that about me too. I get that a lot. But
good. You can calm me down. That's good.
Yeah, but also you're not judgmental. You're great. Really, I mean, I love you. I think you're great, and there's a reason
I
why.
love you too.
Yeah, there's a reason why I've always wanted to stay in touch.
Yeah.
So talk about what your childhood was like, and, what was your childhood like?
My childhood. I was born in Hartford, Connecticut. My father was is that the train?
That is the tri-rail.
I remember that train. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, the tri-rail. Yeah. Because when I lived down there, I lived near the train tracks. I was born in 1963 on August 27th, which, for those people that remember, was the day that Martin Luther King gave his "I Have a Dream" speech. And that's the day that I came out into the world. I was 10 pounds. I was a huge baby. And my mom and dad have been married. They're still married all these years later. Like, I'm 55, so 56 years. And they had me shortly after they were married. And so my childhood was really closely and intimately connected to my parents because I was born shortly after they married, and I really absorbed a lot of the highs and difficulties and challenges that they faced. This was the beginning of the 60s. There were all these assassinations, and then there was a lot of civil rights issues that were going on, and Vietnam War was going on. It was a very different time, and my parents were disturbed by many of these things, and I absorbed them. I was, I think, probably a particularly sensitive kind of child God bless my parents. It's just not easy raising a kid. And I would think I was pretty odd or unusual or something. I had a charmed childhood in a lot of ways. My parents experienced success in those years, and so I was exposed to great education in a private school, an Episcopal prep school where I went for 13 years. And I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up really provincial in Minnesota, and I've had the opportunity to go back there in recent years and, really just appreciate it for what it was. And my parents adopted my brother when I was 7. And that became a big part of my life, having a brother and being a brother. And, we fought like boys do. And I don't know. I'm really lucky to have him. We're close now. Our whole family experienced a period of estrangement, about 10 years of estrangement. But now we're all like probably closer, or to use your word, more authentic than we ever were. Mm. So, there was a lot of cocktail parties, drinking in that childhood. There was a lot of screaming in that marriage and yelling, although my parents really loved each other. Yeah. And that affected me profoundly. I didn't like argument and yelling, although it's, part of life. And I've gone on to have arguments and yelled with many. But I don't really like it. Yeah. And as a kid, it was very... So the blessing of that was that I think I went into a very interior, creative world in which which led to my creative life. So, I've reached the stage in my life where, talking about my childhood and my parents, I don't want to cast any blame on anything that they did, because I think they did a really great job. They did the best they could. There were times in the world that were challenging, and there were times, I think, that were very challenging for them. And now that I'm older and people refer to me at times as a father, I see how difficult it is to be a parent. So I have an enormous amount of my narration of that childhood, I think, changes as the decades go on and I myself get older. So all that is to say, I was very keenly and psychically very connected to my parents, my mother and my father. I was very, 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 very tied up in their romance and that story. Yeah.
Spencer.
And I read a lot. My parents read a lot. My parents are like really smart. A poet went to visit them like a couple of years ago, and we went back into the car, and they're quite old now. And I said, well, what do you think of them? And Mark Wunderlich is this poet who runs the Bennington writing program. And he said, Spencer, they are really, really, really smart. And I think I cried a little bit when he said that, just in the car. We were going our way somewhere, but I was just really lucky to have them, which I don't think I always saw, but I see it now. So that's a little bit of my childhood. Midwest, smart people, Vietnam War. There you go.
So, well, and I think when we met, it must have been during that period of estrangement.
Yeah, we went through a really hard time, but then I got into another beautiful 12-step program called Al-Anon about 15 years ago, and that just blew open my recovery and helped me so much all across the boards. And through the work there, I was really able to reconcile and, get better.
Well, and what you're talking about, I mean, I have definitely experienced in my own path of recovery is that, I mean, there's this trite sort of saying that, it's kind of like unpeeling an onion, layer after layer after layer. And it's really true.
Oh, yeah.
And what you're talking about, I also experienced, going back 6 or 7 years ago when I really started to look at codependency, like and not just as a label, as an illness. Like I read Pia Melody's book, Facing Codependence, and she talks about the 5 core symptoms.
Yeah.
And I started to see how, I mean, it just really took life from me without going into detail. I mean, and I began to see that, my alcoholism was really just an expression of my codependency. That's what it was. And my alcoholism was a way to try to manage that. And then when I stopped drinking, it was still there, I mean, I still had wounds to heal. So, what about when did the drinking start? What was that like for you?
Well, I can actually articulate this now because I've written this poet's memoir. It's a nonfiction book. I've been working on it for 16 years, and it's with an agent now. So I'm hoping that will come into the world. It's been passed over a lot recently, but my drinking began when I went to college. I was 18 years old. I went off to school, to good school, Bowdoin College. Everything was sort of on track, but the one piece that was problematic was my sexuality, which was not heterosexual, and I did not have words, and the world at that time did not really have words to articulate that in the Midwest or in the Northeast. There were no gay groups or anything like that. So I was just heading into, it was like I was driving head on into a semi. I was just heading for this huge realization, of either I was going to accept my sexuality or I was going to commit suicide, which some of my classmates did, and I tried to do, but did not succeed, like my friend Fred, who got a pistol and blew his head off, or Daryl, who put a rope around his neck. So these things were happening. There wasn't language. There was going to be in about 5 years when acquired immune deficiency syndrome landed in the world, and suddenly everybody needed to speak because these guys mainly were going home to die. Right. So all those things were swirling as I went to college in 1981 with my manual typewriter and bottle of whiteout. And I did not commit suicide. I went home. I tried to take my own life. And then my parents really didn't know what to do. God bless them. And, they were probably scared and frightened too. And we just didn't know how to talk to each other. And so I went back to college and I really picked up drinking. And there was a long line of people in my family that were fabulous drinkers. So that seemed like a really good way to handle the emotions that I couldn't deal with. It was also true that physically my body responded to alcohol in a sort of a magical, allergic way that I just could not stop once I started almost from the beginning. And I just sort of thought, well, this is just who I will be.
Right, right.
But, other people have done this and been this, and it's fine. But it was sort of like sitting on top of Chernobyl because, it was just quickly going wildly out of control. Police were getting involved. Yeah. Things were happening that were not good. My grades were suffering tremendously. The sexuality was being sort of expressed, but, in a really messy way in which, even with women that I was involved with at that point, I was just they were becoming nurses. I was becoming I was just passed out, vomit, bedwetting, the whole 9 yards. So I have a strange story in that I drank like that for 5 years through college, managed to graduate somehow. And then the year after, my drinking just didn't get any better. I started drinking alone a lot because that was a way to sort of control it, and then would go out once I had drunk a lot. So it would seem like I was drinking like everybody else, but that wasn't working very well because then I just drank after whatever the appointed engagement was. And I was being invited to less of those engagements because I was not fun to be around. And, right as I was graduating from college, though, the most horrible thing happened, and the most was like a gift of like Christ's gift of coming to the world to save us. And what happened was my cousin, we were the same age, was also drinking just like me. We were not that close, but he was in Florida in St. Augustine. And they were trying to do an intervention with him at that time, which was really like avant-garde and like strange to hear about in 1984. And John was in a bar in St. Augustine, and he got in a bar fight apparently, and they dragged him to the river and they drowned him. So the death of John, which I was told about when I graduated from college, and I was being served a fine for disturbing the peace, and I was barely graduating, the information that John had died was what was going to save my life. And so in a way he died so that I could live. And it's only been, so I've been in program for 33 years. It's only been in the last 5 years that I've even really been able to talk about John, because I just never could find the words for it. Or it just seemed like too sad, or I didn't know how to articulate it. Yeah. It was really just like this horrible thing that happened. But in recent years, I've been able to make sense of it in that I think it brought me to AA. It sort of shocked me into the program, I believe. And so like a year later, I was in a meeting, and I bizarrely, one day at a time, God willing, I've been there ever since. Wow. So, and I think part of staying there is, bearing witness to John's life, who died so young.
Yeah. And
so that's
probably honoring him too, right?
Yeah, I feel like I honor him all the time. So, and in the book that I wrote, it's easy for me to talk about this now, Tom, because I've written about it now over this long period of time, and I can articulate it in sound bites. But for a long time, I just couldn't even put that together. But that's the story, basically. Yeah.
Well, it's a miraculous and overwhelmingly so sort of story. I mean, the idea that, someone in a way kind of died to allow you to live. I mean, that's, it doesn't get much heavier than that.
Well, no, that's the God's honest truth. What happened, and he might have also been gay, which I didn't know for like 25 years. But his sister, he had another sister that also died, I think related to alcoholism. She unfortunately died for heavy drinking. But the one sister is alive in St. Augustine. And when I went to visit her years later, and and she said she thought he might have been gay, which just makes me all the more sad, or all the more important to tell that story, that they would have killed him for that, is beyond what I can imagine. But, you know, these things happened. They happened to Matthew Shepard, and now look, we have a out gay man running for the president of the United States. So I'm so glad that I've lived to see all of this and to tell this story, which is sad, but now, you know, I became a priest and it's a lot less sad. Oh, my battery is going down. Can you put it on? Do you want to pause for like 5 minutes?
The Path to Authenticity is powered by Equivox. For digital marketing and web design services, visit equivox.com. You mentioned living long enough to witness a president of the United States who's an openly gay man. And it's something that I thought about while you were sharing, because, you know, just watching him, Pete Buttigieg, to me, it's just, no matter what you believe, which side of the aisle you fall on, I mean, it's a really compelling story.
Oh, it is. It's the first time I ever gave money to a political campaign. First time ever.
Yeah. And you know, and it really, it speaks to, you know, the topic at hand with this podcast, because what he talks about, that internal struggle of, you know, is it okay to be me? And I think he does a really good job of articulating that quandary that, you know, homosexual people have to grapple with. And, you know, you went through that too.
I did, and I'm quite a bit older than him. And, I mean, it's been amazing times to be alive, and, you know, so yeah, that's exciting.
It is. All right. So that, you said you're sober 33 years now, and that would have made you 22?
23.
Yeah.
I was 23. So yeah, cause I'll be 56 in August. That's right. So on September 1st, it'll be 33.
I'm September 7th, and I was also 23.
Well, look, so we are the lucky ones, my friend.
We are the lucky ones. Yeah. You know, one of the things that I've shared with people over the years, and I really think it's true, because, you know, I've been able to do this and I've been able to maintain this, and it's really been such a gift. I've had a much better life than I would have ever had if I could have continued to drink anywhere near the way I did. But I watch so many people struggle in such a more profound way than, I mean, I struggled. It was really, really hard, but I made a decision. I did the work. I've stuck with it. I've maintained abstinence for, you know, almost half my life now. And I've seen so many people who at times even seemed like they were trying a lot harder than I did, then fall off, and bad things happen. You know, people die.
Well, you must have hit a bottom.
Yeah. Yeah. And but also, you know, it's a gift. It really is a gift.
Well, it's a gift to have hit a bottom. And I think for me, the death of John, it couldn't get more graphic than that.
Yeah.
So I think that image just always will stay with me until I leave the planet. So that's my gift.
Yeah. One of them. You have many.
Yeah.
So, we talked about your bachelor's degree. We've talked about your recovery a little bit. Now, tell me about your experience at Harvard Divinity School. Do I have it right that you stayed in the same building where Ralph Waldo Emerson once lived? Is that right?
That is correct.
Wow. What was that like?
That was a long time ago. I was very young, and I just had these early inklings that I wanted to study religion. I wanted to study faith. I didn't know where it was going to go, but that was the very beginning of it. And there I was at Harvard, which of course is, this famous place. The Divinity School is was kind of sort of funky and flaky and not at the prestige level of the rest of the place. I didn't feel.
Okay.
But I was lucky to go there. I was lucky my parents supported that. And I was in early recovery, and so I just kind of went to meetings, and life was what I did between meetings. And I just got a degree, but I didn't know what I was going to do afterwards. I still was kind of clueless, and it was just going to take a lot more life experience for me to be ready.
Yeah. And so at what point did you realize you were a poet?
A poet. Well, it's such a hard thing to call yourself. It's like calling yourself a yeoman it's like talking about unicorns or, it's this strange thing that doesn't really usually lead to a job. Most of my poet friends that have jobs, they call themselves poets. They teach in universities and they teach the writing of poetry, and they make, really decent livings and it's a great thing about America that you can do that. You can't really do that in Europe. And it's made the poetry community very vibrant in the United States, I think, because it becomes like a viable career. It never seemed like it was going to be my career because I was always doing something else. I worked in retail for 13 years, and then I became an Episcopal priest. So I've never really made my living from being a poet. So calling myself one always just seems, but okay, it is true that I have 2 books of poetry published. And so I love it more than anything else. And I think it just began, when I was a kid and I had these fantasy worlds and I made up these maps and played in the woods all day long. And then later with my brother. And then that just sort of turned into a love of literature. And I tried writing a short story. I tried writing a play when I was young, but it seemed like poetry. I couldn't stop reading it. And when I went to this prep school, I was in AP English class, and I had to work really, really hard in high school to get into the college that I got into. Like, it wasn't easy for me. I wasn't just like, all that studying was not easy for me. I had flashcards. I had to stay up late at night. It was a lot of work for me. And I remember I graduated 15th in my class. There were 52 people. So I was the bottom 10%. And I had worked for that spot. Like, I really worked. And I got it. And I got into AP English class. And I remember in that class that I just metabolized everything that was assigned. I didn't have to work as hard in that class. It just like came to me. I just memorized stuff. I read the stuff. It really spoke to me. And I think I felt something like magical, or there was something, God gave me a gift. And it was the first time that I felt it, was in that class. And then it just grew. And I worked on a book of poems at the time I met you. Somewhere around the time I met you, that book was published, but, it was like, I spent like 20 years trying to write poetry and 15 years submitting that book to competitions for which it was rejected 300 times. So I was 41 when that book won. I was not I was kind of a young poet, seems now, but I was a little seasoned at 41, wasn't exactly instant. So that probably helped me.
How so?
Well, I was older. some of these poets I've had to deal with this festival we're having, they're young and they're kind of surly and arrogant and righteous. and I was not like that because, the world had beat the shit out of me by the time I won that prize. I mean, I had eaten a lot of humble pie. But by the time I had won that prize, and I was very grateful. But I had eaten a lot of humble pie.
Well, and, for me, a
lot.
Yeah. When we met, I was, before I got sober, I covered some high school sports for a couple newspapers, daily newspapers. I had a contract with the Palm Beach Post about a year after I moved down here.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I knew I was supposed to write, and I kind of had a similar experience with news writing as you had with literature. It was very easy. I didn't struggle. Where a lot of people just agonize over every word when they write. It just was never like that for me. Not with that kind of story. But as an adult, I end up, working in the addiction treatment industry and kind of going into marketing and public relations and using my journalism skills that way. But still in the back of my mind, always had this idea that there's a book. What am I supposed to do with it? I didn't know what it was. I kind of had some ideas of what it wasn't or what I didn't want to do with it. But it was just this nagging that, what am I supposed to do with this? And it was really hard. I carried it around for a long time, and I've only begun to figure it out over the last couple years. And part of that process for me was coming to the conclusion that, I don't have to know. And I don't have to feel guilty. I don't have to beat myself up because I haven't written a book yet. Because you know what? I didn't know. I didn't know what to write. I didn't know what I was supposed to write yet. And I didn't know what I needed to know to write it yet. And I'm sure you've experienced something similar that, you have more to say when you've lived through more and you've been through more. You have a different perspective. I mean, the things that I'm writing about now, I couldn't have written at 23 years old. There's no way. It just, I didn't have it. I had no idea. I had to go through the ups and downs of life that I've gone through. So I definitely get that. So what year The Clerk's Tale was the name of your first book of poetry. And what year was that published?
2004.
Okay. And then where did the Guggenheim Fellowship come in?
Well, after that book won that prize, Louise Glick had selected it. She became the Poet Laureate of the United States, and this poetry life and being known as a poet kind of took off in a very surprising way. And I was awarded a Guggenheim and a National Endowment for the Arts grant and a Whiting Writers Award and an award from the Library of Congress. I mean, it was quite something. And it was a splash in the world. And I think I was fortunate that I was also a little older because it certainly was head turning to have all that happen after so long having nothing happen. But it was good that I was in my early 40s rather than my 20s or 30s, I think.
Well, and something I mentioned before we began recording, that a vivid memory I have of you from when we very first met. In your apartment, you had all these framed letters, most of which were, I should probably call them friendly rejection letters from,
is that, or yeah,
or were they acceptance letters? I'm not sure, but they were from literary publications where you had submitted your poetry, and it just, as a guy at that age who was trying to figure it out, what I'm supposed to do with my writing and understanding the role of rejection and all this, to see you embrace that and go through that and celebrate yourself for fighting that fight. And then years later to tell me that like you submitted this book to 300 times before it. I mean, it takes something different, Spencer, to do that. Most people give up after one or two tries. 300 times. That's a lot. That's a big deal. That says something about you and your character. And I've always liked that about you. It's a very powerful thing.
Yeah.
And it paid off.
Well, it did. Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, I remember that. That was in Lantana. It was this little room. I didn't have much money, and I still don't have much money, but, it was so humble, and there was this extra bedroom. It had green shag carpeting, and the desk was a door that I got from Home Depot.
And you had it on top of sawhorses.
Yeah.
And I think you had a pane of glass over the top of the door, so you had a flash surface. That is correct.
Yeah, that's correct. Yep. So, yeah, amazing. I just kept working there. Yeah. Yeah.
So then the Guggenheim thing, how long does something like that last? What was that like? And
that was 1 year. That was 1 year. It was an award, and it was for a little while. I had some extra money, which was nice. I traveled. I went to Ireland twice, went to Italy. I worked less at the clothing store. I didn't quit my job, but I went from 5+ days a week, 70-hour work weeks, down to 30-hour work weeks. And I rested for the first time in a very long time. And I took a watercolor class, and then I took a class at hospice to be a pastoral care volunteer. And then and then I started giving like these readings and meeting students around the country. And I think the next step would have been a creative writing teaching job in one of these colleges, which would have, paid me good income. But I just didn't feel drawn to it. I didn't feel like it was my line. And so I waited. It was about 5 years after those things happened that I went to seminary.
Wow.
Yeah. I retired from Brooks Brothers. I went to seminary, but I stayed in that store about 5 years more.
Wow.
After the Guggenheim and the book.
So now, when did your more recent book, how do you pronounce it, by the way? It's The Road to
Emmaus. Yeah, it's kind of a funny word, isn't it? Or in Spanish, it would be Emmaus, but in English, it's Emmaus.
Which, is that a biblical reference?
It is. It's my favorite story in the Bible. It comes up in the documentary film too, but it only occurs once in the Bible, and it's these two disciples. One is named Cleopas, and the other one is unnamed, and we don't know anything about that person. And they are leaving after the crucifixion scene, and they have so many doubts. They don't believe what they've seen. They don't believe it has any significance in their life. And they're full of doubts. And then a stranger falls among them and talks to them. And their hearts are warmed, is the famous line in the Bible. And they realize that the person that they were walking with was Christ. And just as they realize that, he disappears. And so it's a very human story that we don't always realize what's in front of us until it's not there anymore. And with the story of my cousin that was murdered, there's many examples I can give you of, people maybe I knew in Florida that are no longer with us, the full significance of their meaning in my life. There was a guy named John Kay, an older man in those meetings down there, who I think about a lot, who's died. But the full understanding of John, comes sometimes after the person isn't there anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's pretty cliche, actually. You don't know what you got till it's gone.
Well, basically, yeah, exactly. So that second book was much different from the first book, and centers around a large, long poem was about my sponsor in the AA program, and sort of a tribute to him and about him. And it was a weird poem to write, and I worked on it a long time, and that book came out 10 years later after my first book. And I'm very proud of it. Yeah.
Wow. So what's next? What's the future hold for Spencer Reece?
Well, we've got this big literary festival that we're going to pull off here in Madrid. 80 people are coming. It's an international literary festival, the Unamuno Author Series, and it's sort of my thank you to Madrid. They're coming from all, so we're building up for that. We're making an anthology. I've got this raft of volunteers that have worked so hard, and it's been this amazing thing that we're about to pull off on May 27th through June 1st. It'll be historic. There's never been a Anglophone literary festival in Madrid ever. And it's been a lot of work. It's been challenging, but hopefully it'll be a lot of joy. And both the film, the anthology about the girls, and this anthology of these authors and this festival are sort of a way for me to give back to an art that gave me so much. It's given me so much. And I think that's going to be it for a while. I'm tired, and I'm getting a little older. I'm 55. I'll be 56. And I may be on the horizon for another kind of job. I don't know. I feel like God is calling me to something, and I don't know exactly what it is or where it is yet. Maybe back home in the States. My parents are, they're really aging. They're 86, and I feel we're at the shores of the River Jordan now, and I just would like to be a little closer to them and bring back all that I've learned from Europe. Bring it a little closer to home, maybe the Northeast, where my mom's from and my brother lives, and they live there now. So I don't know. We never know what the future exactly holds. I know the festival is happening. I signed a contract for another book of poems, but it won't be out for like 5 years. And I'm hoping this book of prose that I've worked on for almost 2 decades, that I can see that into print. Like, I hope that's the next thing I can see, but it's really challenging. I mean, even after all this time, that book has been passed over 20 times. People say the writing is great. So you never really give up on this, this being rejected and having to start over and dust yourself off and go back into the ring and try again. So it probably will go on until I'm done.
Yeah. Well, how would you feel about reading something for us?
Oh, yeah. You want me to do that? I'll read you a new short poem and then we'll be done.
Okay.
Because I got to go. I got a puppy. I got to go look after my puppy.
Okay. All right.
I will read you a short poem that is from this new book.
Okay.
So,
I don't know what that was. Was that you?
What?
That noise? Did you hear that?
No, what was that?
I don't know what it was, but I just heard there was a big beep. Anyway, it's not beeping anymore. That's good.
Oh, because I probably unplugged the cord.
That's what it was. That's what it was.
So now we're, Okay, so this poem is dedicated to a priest friend of mine. I have these colleagues that I check in with. You know, when you do a job like this, you need like support with people that are doing the same thing. And his name is Scott Walters, and he's a priest in Memphis. And this is really weird because I wrote this poem before I knew that he was going to come with me to this place, which is this tiny little humble church with 4 people in it in Segovia. And it's just a poem that's describing the scene of doing the bread and the wine with like 3 people in this like fluorescent lit little storefront. And that's part of what I do in going to this place. And that's really all it's about. So it's called La Santa Feina, which is Spanish for the Holy Eucharist. What do you say in English? Like the
sacrament?
Yeah. I've been speaking Spanish so long I forget the terminology in English. So here's the poem, and it takes place in Segovia, which is this beautiful town not far from Madrid that has a Roman aqueduct that goes through the middle of town, and it's also where the poet Antonio Machado lived, and there's a museum for him there, and I refer to his piss pot, because if you go to the museum, you can see where he had to go to the bathroom. Oh, my goodness. All right.
Okay.
Roving gold Segovia, your Roman aqueduct, your closed museum, Machado's piss pot, tan fields of wheat, the large buses chuff, doors always locked. We are 5, no 4, stuck in a storefront. A stained, rained-on page taped to the tinted glass lists our hour wrong. Once a month, I say Mass, hold my box that snaps, soiled by the palms of our priest, shot dead under that midget dictator, corrugated, nicked cover. Inside, the host molds the wine like turpentine. They don't say much. Often my accent is off, more of a loud cough, broken up by a lisp. I measure our Savior. Todo está preparado, acercaos a la mesa de Dios. Mercifully, it's over quick. Later, they'll feed me in this gruff yellow land Plath was said to hate. But she was young. This republic requires respect. Age inures. The large sky-like foil crackles in the olive grove. I'll lay my old head on the fold-out bed where a mattress coil pricks my backbone. Oh, to be loved like this. That's it. It's dedicated to Scott Walters, the great priest in Memphis.
Wow, that's beautiful. I really appreciate you sharing that, Spencer. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for asking me.
Did you just plug your phone back in?
No.
The beep just happened again, so I'm going to ignore that.
Oh.
But listen, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. And I hope you come back here sometime to visit, or we get to cross paths again. It's really been a gift to have you in my life, and you're always so warm to me, and I appreciate it. And I just have loved having this conversation with you, Spencer. Thank you.
Oh, come on. You're adorable. So,
all right, there you have it. Spencer Reece. Great guy. Beautiful man. So again, if you enjoyed the show, please leave a rating or review at Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Maybe forward the episode to a friend who you know would enjoy it. Just need to get the word out. Every little bit helps. If you have questions or comments, you can call and leave a voicemail at 561-247-4757. I'd love to hear any feedback you might have to offer. I want to thank the show's sponsor, The Manor and Windrose Recovery. Thank the band Punk Rock Opera, whose music you hear throughout the show. Their songs are used with permission from the artist and under a Creative Commons license. As always, thank you to Wendy Chin at Equivox. And connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, both at The Path to Authenticity. Find me on Clubhouse Sunday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern, where I'm wrapping up a 6-part series on codependence in the next couple weeks. But I'd love to connect with you there. I have more stuff I'm working on that I'll be doing on a regular basis on Clubhouse, and I'll keep you guys posted about that. So I hope November has been good to you. Wish you many blessings for December. Let's close out this year strong. And as always, I appreciate you investing your time in me and in listening to this podcast. I don't take it for granted, so thank you. Hope you have a great week. Be nice.
That's our story. I hope you enjoyed the punk rock opera. We have one last piece of music for you. It goes like this.
Okay, go.
You cannot make us. We are the Jedi Man. Self-made bands, we cut our teeth with bloody hands. The rage has instilled in us, can feed a crowd, give them a rush.
Thank you. And good night.